But I mean, do you want us to do the 5-minute overall thing? Because I don't have much. Do you? Or if you've have you got something planned?
No.
I don't care.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Carroll Chamber of Commerce Legislative Forum, and thank you for joining us for this virtual event. I'm John Brocklesby from the Legislative Committee, and I want to thank the City of Carroll for allowing us to use their facility today. We really appreciate that opportunity. The format of today's program will include some prepared questions that the Legislative Committee have formulated. The event today will take approximately 1 hour. And it is now my pleasure to introduce our guest this morning, and that would be Senator Craig Williams and Representative Brian Best. And gentlemen, if you want to flip a coin and decide who is going to take the first, let's do it in rank order. Would this time count more than?
I think age comes before beauty here. So Craig will go first.
Okay, Senator.
All right, you want to just do an opener here?
Yeah.
All right, very good. Hey, good morning, everyone. Senator Craig Williams from Manning. Thanks for being with us here today, and thank you for the City of Carroll for putting this, allowing us to use their location. So we just finished up week 13 in the Senate, and we did an awful lot of debate last week. I felt like the debate process has been a bit slow this year. Others tell me that it's pretty rapid, so I guess being a freshman, I don't always know what to expect. So I think we've run 150 or 160 bills all the way through the process so far on the Senate floor, and 36 of them were just last week, plus I think we did 2 resolutions as well. So a number of big ticket items that went through last week: broadband service in the state, protecting constitutional rights, cutting property taxes, et cetera. So some big things have happened, and we're nearing the end. So we're getting to the point where the appropriations process will kick in, and the budgets will kick in the next week or so. April 30th is the target date, I guess, for ending the legislative session. It may end earlier, it may end later. We don't know until we get through all the process. So that's what we've got going on right now.
Thank you, sir. Brian?
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. The last couple of weeks have been pretty fast and furious as far as making sure we got things through the second funnel to keep them eligible for the floor debates. And so we've done quite a few things on the transportation side. We've passed quite a few things that needed to be done, and a lot of things that we do was pretty mundane. Some of the things are actually probably more than half the things that we pass are things that just keep us clean up code, keeps us in the same page as what the federal government requires, and sometimes we just have to pass certain bills that are just code cleanup, kind of boring, but we've got all that stuff done now. That's important to get done. Even though it's mundane, it is very important because federal dollars are always attached to those types of bills. And so it's been, like I said, it's been pretty busy. Last week was kind of unusual because most of the bills that were policy that we're going to get through are already through. Now there's a couple more coming in, and but a lot of it was just kind of waiting for our appropriations committees to meet and to get things done that we could bring to the floor. So it's going to really pick up momentum here, I think, in the next couple of weeks. We have farmers in the Iowa House and in the Senate, and they're always talking about soil temperature, which I came from a farm, but it doesn't mean as much to me as it does to them. But when the soil temperature reaches a certain level, they always like to say, hey, we got to get it wrapped up soon here so we can go home and farm. So we're working on it, and I look for us to get out on time.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. All right, we'll start with the prepared questions then, and the first one has to do with the funnel week. And the question is, of all the bills that have survived the funnel, which do you anticipate having the momentum to make it to the finish line. Brian?
Start with me. Okay. So some of the bills that actually probably haven't passed a committee yet, because anything that goes through Ways and Means is funnel proof. So some of these bills that didn't necessarily survive a funnel but are funnel proof, and one is, and we'll talk about this again. I think there's a question about the bottle bill again later, but that's a bill that I'm confident will pass the House, and I'll be very disappointed if it doesn't. We've got to get this thing through, and what it does is in the end, it gives an extra penny to the redemption centers, and that is what the bill needs to do. We got to get an extra penny to the redemption centers, and so that one I'm fairly confident we'll get through. There's a lot of good bills that are broadband bills that were passed that have gotten through, and I'm very confident have a really good chance of getting passed this year and signed by the governor. So those are a couple. We did a lot of really good child care bills in the House that are over in the Senate now, and I think a couple of them haven't gotten through committee, but they have time yet. But I hope that we can get all those through and get those to the governor also. We need child care in Iowa, so I'll let you go, Craig.
Very good. Well, there's one that I'm pretty confident in getting through, and that's one of them that I'm running, and that's SF 586, which probably nobody cares about, but it's a banking regulations bill. It's a 97-page, relatively mundane bill defining lock boxes and other interesting things of that nature. So it was put together by the Department of Banking, and it's 2 years of work on their part, trying to clean up code from, I think 1995 was the last time it was updated. So it probably should have passed some time ago, but there were some contentious parts of it, and all those contentious parts have been removed and resolved between all the parties involved. So it's what we call a non-con now. It's a non-controversial bill, and I'm confident. In fact, I think we're running that one this coming week, and then it'll head over to the House to get the approval on that side. And that one I'm fairly confident we'll get through. Other bills, this is one of the unfortunate parts, is we don't always get to see. In fact, I looked again last night, and I don't know what bills we're running on the Senate floor as early as Monday of next week, and that's a disappointment to me that we don't get a little bit more heads up on that. I kind of understand why it is, but at the same time, it'd be really nice to know exactly here's the bills that we're running next week, and give us an opportunity to really thoroughly read them. And I do read them before we vote on them. I'll run through them and make sure that I understand to the best of my ability what they do. So what will make it through from here? Like I said, we did run through quite a few bills last week, and most of them, you'll notice, and I put in my newsletter that came out yesterday, that they have an HF number, a House file number on them, which means they've already run through the House. And then once we pass them on the Senate side, they're heading to the governor's desk. So that was over 30 bills that got signed, that will be signed, I hope, by the governor this week. So, very good.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
The next two questions, subject matter is the budget. With that process starting and the areas funded, what do you expect to see an increase in this year?
First,
sir.
Okay, very good. So, yeah, it has started. The governor, I think, was just over $8 billion on her budget recommendations. The Senate was just under $8 billion, and I believe the House is a little over $8 billion on what they want to put in the budget this year. So, I haven't seen what those deltas are yet. The differences between our side and the House side to understand, why do we need to spend the extra money. I think one of them is on the broadband side of it. There's $150 million that the governor would like to have earmarked for this year, and the House has it at $100 million today. And I think the Senate side actually has that higher at this point in time. So things that will definitely get funded. I'm confident we're going to get something funded on broadband, and it'll be a substantial amount of money. Department of Corrections will see, I'm sure, a decent increase this year. They've been ignored for a number of years, and the judiciary, the Supreme Court, and other judicial areas will get, I think, a decent improvement in the budget. Education, obviously, mental health will definitely see an increase in the budget. And then Medicaid and Human Services are as well. We'll definitely see an increase in the budget this coming year. I think overall, the budget recommendation is somewhere around a 3.5% increase over the prior year, something like that. So it's substantial.
Yeah. Okay. So I had everything I had written down here. Craig stole my thunder on court systems, public safety, corrections. Do you have anything to add, Craig, that I can use? I feel like I'm not prepared, but this, I honestly, those are the three top things that they're really looking at. Court systems. I think we really have a great court system in Iowa, and they have what they call family courts, and those have done an amazingly successful job of keeping families together and sometimes keeping kids out of having to go to some type of a group home or foster parenting and things like that. So that was long overdue. Public safety, it was getting to the point where the equipment that the protective equipment that the public safety folks use, highway patrol and things like that, they were actually using equipment that was not as up to date as it should be. So we're trying to get all those things caught up now, and that's very important that we do that. So I'm just thankful that we can do that this year.
Okay. Since we're staying on this subject, budget, I'll let you go first this time, Representative Betts. Do you expect the House and the Senate to be able to push their budget through quickly?
Well, I think we both have a budget that we are pretty close to in each side, one in the House, one in the Senate. I think the question is when we bring those two together, the compromises that'll take place, and I don't think we're that far off that we can't find something that we both can live with. Theirs tends to be to spend a little bit less money, but we're just trying to get to the right point. So it's hard to predict. It kind of depends on the leaderships and where they want to go. But I will say one thing that I really appreciate, and that's the fact that in the House we have the opportunity to really voice our opinions, and if we have a disagreement, we have to reach agreement. Our leadership isn't really hard pressing us to march along with their recommendations. So that's a breath of fresh air, which I really love that we're doing in the House. So there's certain things that I probably wouldn't be able to vote for in budget things that maybe a few disagreements, but in the end of the day, I'm sure we'll come to a conclusion pretty quickly. Hopefully, before the 30th or whatever the last day is supposed to be, we could even possibly get done maybe a little bit earlier than that.
Yeah, I'd agree with everything that Brian just said. And there's a desire to get finished by April 30th, and it's not just to get out of Dodge. It's really a desire to make sure that everything that we need to have done is accomplished for the citizens as quickly as possible. But we need to be efficient about it and use taxpayer money as judiciously as possible. The fact that the Republicans have a majority in both the House and the Senate and in the governor's office, I think reduces some of the real fighting over where that money gets spent. But at the same time, I mean, the big fighting right now is just going to be between the House and the Senate on whose priorities are the highest. But I just don't think that we're that far apart that we won't get it accomplished in a decent amount of time and be out of there on time this year. So will it be overly fast? I don't know. Again, I think we just have to look at the deltas and what I mean, the differences between what they have and what we have and come to a resolution. I think it'll happen quickly.
Okay. Next subject matter, we've already spoken about a couple of times this morning, broadband. And the question is, if you would start us here, Craig, please.
Yeah, so
do you expect the governor's broadband bill to see debate on the Senate floor or pass and get to the governor's desk?
It did, actually. It's one of the things we did last week was House File 848 did pass through the Senate. There's not money attached to it, but it's the definitions of the Tier 1 structures, the Tier 2 structures, Tier 3 structures, and and how that will be laid out, what kind of cost sharing the state will do with whoever puts in the fiber lines or the cellular lines or whatever technology they choose to use for internet, for broadband across the state. But it passed, and it should be on its way to the governor's desk. Again, the House has $100 million in their budget, and the governor asked for $150 million. But that's a lot of money. It'll get through the system here, and we're one step closer today to getting broadband across the state of Iowa.
So you're telling me that the language is there, just the amount of money is the issue.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And please.
Thank you. Yeah, the only question now is the amount of money and how we're going to get it covered in over how many years we go. I mean, there's few things that we have to agree on, but there's no doubt that we're all in agreement on broadband, and that's a great feeling to know that we're going somewhere with that, because it's a big time rural Iowa issue, and so I'm happy to see that happen, and I'm really optimistic that we're going to get the ball rolling here very quickly in the state of Iowa. We rank very low nationally on broadband and the ability to communicate through broadband, and so this is going to get us up there ahead of other states. So it's a great thing.
Let me add to that just real quick that there were some changes in the governor asked for a minimum speed of 100 over 100, so 100 megabytes of upload speed and 100 megabytes of download speed as being the minimum to qualify for this, and that got changed. There are some areas where, in order to get that, you have to lay fiber optic lines, and you've got some locations where it's 7 miles from the nearest person to the next person, and laying fiber cable is really expensive. And so some changes were made to that where they might be able to use like a cellular tower or some type of a tower arrangement, and that technology cannot get to that 100 megabyte upload speed today, and I think it's 20 or 25, which is still pretty darn fast for most people. And so that got changed in the final draft of it, and it's going through.
Okay, thank you. Housing is the next subject matter. Are you supportive of the governor's housing bill and the expansion of workforce housing tax credit, Iowa housing tax credit, and the redevelopment of the tax credit?
Okay, so start with me this time. Okay.
Please.
Yeah. So the short answer is yes. I'm very supportive of this. These are, again, issues that will help us in our problems that we have here in rural Iowa with housing, shortages of housing. You can't develop an economy if you don't have any place to live. So these are things that I think are very helpful. And yet, so short answer, yes, I am.
Yeah, so this is another one of those bills that seems to be stuck somewhere, and I think it's stuck in Ways and Means again on both sides of the chambers. And this is not my area of expertise, but I tried to read up on it and understand as much as I can about it. So part of it is the redevelopment. That's the brownfield redevelopment for areas where, like, say a corporation goes out of business, and then you can't redevelop that area because there might be some issue with ground contamination or something else that's going on. And the brownfield redevelopment tax credit allows people to go in and try to clean that up and reutilize or revitalize that area and get some support doing that. So that's part of it. And then there's the workforce housing. So the workforce housing, I wrote down the request from the governor is to double that tax credit, currently at $25 million, increase that to $50 million, and there's currently an earmark in that current $25 million for small cities to spend or to have a credit available of $10 million, and that would double to $20 million of the $50 million as well. And then there's an Iowa housing tax credit that's $15 million for low-income housing. So I really need to understand exactly what the problem is, why it's being held up, and am I supportive? Yes, overall, but it'd be interesting to find out if it's stuck, why it's stuck, and what some of the issues are that are around it. Okay.
Thank you. Next subject matter is tax, and since this is a Senate bill, maybe we'll start with the senator. The Senate has introduced a new tax bill, which it makes several changes to mental health funding in Iowa. Do you support this type of change to mental health funding?
Yes, I do, and no, I don't. So here's the issue. So SF 587, the issue that I have is that we've got mental health being paid for on property taxes, right? And so I'm trying to think of how do you get a correlation between a cornfield and somebody's substance abuse issues in the county, and it's difficult for me to get that relationship going. So a lot of people say people taxes for people issues, so it should be paid for out of income tax and sales tax and not out of property tax. And I fundamentally agree with that. The issue then on the other side of that is, well, if we take it off of the property taxes and we move it to a state thing, the state's doing all the funding. How do you get local control, and how do you make sure that all the local needs are taken care of? Where today, because it's on the taxpayer, the county supervisors and the regional people, they're kind of under the gun of local taxpayers to make sure that they use that money wisely. So I'm very much in support of getting it off of the property tax rolls. The only way I know to do that is to move it to the state. So from that standpoint, yeah, I'm in favor of it. The mental health costs are escalating, and I just don't know how else we could do it. So the bill itself, the Senate file bill, does put into place, I think it's $60 million in year one and $110 million or $100 million. I think it's $110 million total in year two, and then it has escalations over the next several years to make sure that there's always funding available for mental health. It's actually an increase in mental health spending and includes some of the governor's requests for increases in mental health spending. So I think all those things about it are good. That particular bill also has a lot of other moving parts to it that may or may not cause some issues, and I think you got another question on that. So from there, I'll leave it back to Brian.
Yeah, I agree with Craig. I'm for it philosophically. It's fine. It does make sense, and we're always trying to do what we can to help with property tax relief in the state. If there was ever a time to do it, this might be about the time we need to start really thinking about it, because we do have the ability to do these things. There was a time, well, up until this year in the past, this wasn't even considered really very viable, just because of the amount of money that the state was taking in, and we weren't showing much growth. So to fork out over $100 million was a tough sell. But I think it's definitely something we need to keep talking about. As Craig said, the conundrum is, what do you do when you have something that really is run locally, much more so than a lot of these types of things throughout the state. You're going to state fund it, so there has to be some way of figuring out how to keep local control if that's what we want to do, and still fund it through the state. I'm for it to the degree that we don't mess with other types of monies that we're paying for now, so we don't have like a system where we put money in here, but we take it from another part of some of the things that we sent back to the cities and the municipalities, like the rollback and things like that that we're funding currently. So I would much prefer not to have to give up paying back on the rollback in order to pay for this. So I think it has to be something that funds itself.
You were correct, Senator. We do have a follow-up question to this, so we're staying on the subject matter of tax. Does these additional divisions of the bill complicate the possibility of it passing?
You want me to take that first?
Sure, please.
All right, very good. So there's a couple of them in there that I don't think are going to be a problem. So one of them I think gave people some immediate heartburn was the elimination of something called PEARL, which is the Public Education Recreation Levy Tax. But there's another program called SAVE, which can be used for exactly the same thing. So they're kind of a duplicative program. So getting rid of PEARL shouldn't have a big problem with that. And then there's a division on elderly and disabled tax relief, which would allow somebody who is over 70 and on a fixed income under 250% of the federal poverty level to essentially freeze their taxes for the rest of their lives. I don't think that's going to be a big problem for most people to swallow. The backfill is probably the biggest issue that's in there, and it's complicated. And quite honestly, I don't fully understand exactly what that means. I've been told that the total of the backfill from the state to counties and cities isn't that significant of a percentage of their budget, but at the same time, that's one area that I'm just not overly excited about, and I think the House is probably going to make some changes to that. The tax triggers is in there as well. So back in 2018, some significant tax law changes were made that said if the state's income level is above a certain amount, then the income tax will go down. And I'm not sure why those triggers were ever put in, to be honest with you. And I think they need to be removed. This bill removes them, and so hopefully the House will accept that one and go on. I think that removing the triggers is probably in 3 or 4 other bills that we're sending over to the House, so we'll get it in there somehow.
I think there's a few things that will complicate it a bit, but like as Craig was saying, and what I was calling the rollback later is Craig backfill. That's what I was intending to say was a backfill, and so I think the backfill, removement of the backfill. I think we need to really be very careful. I'm not, as of right now, I would not be able to. I would not support it. Getting rid of the backfill. That's about the only thing I think. The one thing that this does do, which I think some folks will like and some folks will not like, is that it will change the way we look at the extra penny that we would charge in state sales tax, because that's something that the governor was looking for, and then a lot of that was going to go towards mental health. I think 3/8 of that penny, and then the other of it going to, or maybe 3/8 was going to go towards conservation and recreational things in Iowa. If we were to do that, this would really change how that would be looked upon too. So this is something that I am supportive of, and again, any complications I think probably could be worked out.
All right, thank you. Next subject matter is renewable fuels. With updated infrastructure and biodiesel mandate, how much demand do you think the bill can create for our renewable fuel industry in Iowa? And if you would.
Sure, I'll go ahead and start on that one. I think it would be a good thing for agriculture and for farmers, and it would definitely make a difference in hopefully helping with commodity prices as well. I think I've probably received, maybe 200 emails on this subject, and I think it's about even 100 for and 100 against. And the ones that are concerned about it are the ones that see this as a unfunded mandate to require service stations to change their pumps and do things that would make them E15 more able to provide that. And also there was a few things in the bill that kind of limited the supply or your ability to get zero zero ethanol items. And so I think we're working around that part of it. But until we can, I just don't like the idea of mandating. So if we could get around that and incentivize these service stations and places like that to do this, then I think it would be a very good bill. I think it's a good idea in principle, but I think we have to be really careful that we don't cost a lot of economic hardship for businesses that are, especially the smaller ones, that don't have a whole lot of extra money to spend on the cost of these updates. It does take place over a long period of time. It's not like they have to do it tomorrow. They have quite a few years to do this. But at the same time, if it's a mandate, I'm really a bit concerned about it.
All right. So this is one of my favorite sayings here. I'm going to rattle off some statistics, but I always tell people that 66.7% of all statistics are made up. So think about that for a minute. So the numbers that I've been hearing is 117 million gallons of ethanol per year in the first 5 years of this, which is 30 million bushels of grain a year, which equates out to about 200,000 acres of additional farmland or of additional corn demand with the ethanol mandate or update. So Iowa's a leader in ethanol production. We make more ethanol than any other state, and yet Minnesota and Missouri on either side of us, they do have E10 standards and we do not. So that's an interesting issue, and I'm with Brian. I don't like mandates, but I do like to support our local economy and infrastructure as well. So other numbers that I've heard, ethanol is far less carbon intensive than gasoline, can reduce greenhouse gases by as much as 61%. That was from a study from Harvard. This bill will create more than 3,500 new jobs, generate nearly $550 million in household income by 2026. Will add more than $450 million to Iowa's GDP, which that generates approximately $182 million in new state and local tax revenue by 2026. Now, if that's the case, $182 million in new state and local tax revenue, I'm with Brian. We can probably afford to spend a few bucks on the infrastructure. Now, the bill itself, it does have some cost share built into it for gas stations to upgrade, and that's a 50% cost share up to $30,000. I don't know how far $30,000 goes in an upgrade. Probably not real far. Maybe one pump, maybe a tank. I don't know. If you're going to upgrade something already and you can get a cost share to do it, yeah, that's pretty nice. If you're not planning on doing it, now you have to do it, that's not so nice. So I think we've got some work to do to clean that up. There's also an issue in there that E0, if you would call it that, something without ethanol in it at all, regular gasoline. It's not outlawed, but it's essentially outlawed by making it a restricted use gasoline or fuel and having to label it as restricted use fuel, which automatically makes people think, I don't want to put restricted use fuel in my stuff here. So that will reduce it. And I think the bill still says that if you have an E0 tank, that it has to be at least 91 octane, which is a really high octane rating. So, I mean, all those things are built in there, obviously, to do what you think it should do to get rid of gasoline and get people to move towards ethanol. What do you call them? The 6 cent incentive for ethanol is still in there, and I've talked all about ethanol. Biodiesel is a big part of it as well, and the biodiesel part of it is something I'm just not that familiar with, and I need to get studied up a little bit more on. And I think we're looking at a B11 to B20, well, B5 in the wintertime and as much as B20 in the summertime. And there is some differences in diesel fuel throughout the year for gelling up. So those things are built into the bill. I've had a lot of truckers talk to me about I don't really want to run biodiesel in my tank, but you have to if you go across the border into Minnesota. So a lot of moving parts in this bill. I think overall I'm supportive. I think there's some issues in it that need to be worked out.
Okay, thank you. Next subject matter, transportation. The commercial driver's license CDL testing fee will allow DOT and counties to provide CDL testing to charge $25 for each of the 3 tests required. Do you support that bill? And Brian, since you probably like this,
Yeah.
would you please?
Yeah, thank you. I authored the bill, so I have to support it. Sorry. Here I am. Yeah, and so this is something that I've been working on ever since basically year 1, when the DOT took their station, or whatever you want to call it, their DOT place away from Carroll and shut it down. And so ever since then, I think we have seen some issues in this general area of western Iowa where it's hard to get a CDL, and there's CDL deserts throughout the state. And so what this bill does is, actually the bill was changed a little bit in that you can still go to a DOT station and get your CDL for exactly what you do now. except you do pay a $25 fee, but you don't pay the $75. But what this is really trying to get done is county treasurers at this point and county taxpayers are getting paid about $8 for somebody to come in and get their CDL. That's something that the state used to do, and there was enough state places around back in the day. I don't know how many years ago this has really become a problem, but there are more and more CDLs on the road, and a lot of jobs require CDLs. And now we have a situation where, with fewer DOT stations than what we used to have, to go in and get your CDL, and more demand, it's being laid out on the counties to try to take care of this issue. And so if you go to a county, you have to pay the $25 up front to get your time, to get your slot. And that's because of no-shows, because a lot of times what's happened in the past is a CDL driver or a prospective CDL driver would maybe get a spot in 2 or 3 different locations. And then if they failed the first one, they could just move on to the second one. They already had their time, their slot. And then they wouldn't show up. And so we'd have a lot of no-shows because they'd passed the first time, didn't need the second slot. And so that has been a problem the DOT has brought to our attention in a lot of areas. One thing also that this bill does is if you are a government entity, and even if you're going to a county, or a county treasurer to get this done, you only pay $25 instead of the $75 to help with the schools. There's a lot of school drivers that have to get CDLs to keep the cost down a little bit for those government entities and those folks that maybe have to pay for it themselves. The commercial driver's license for private industry generally, and I'm not saying this is always the case, but in a lot of cases, the employer is paying for this. They're paying for the person to come in and get the CDL. And everybody that I've talked to, including the Iowa Motor Trucking Association, who is probably the one entity that might be against this because it's, in their case, it's an extra cost. They're paying $75. Most of these employers for the driver to come in, they're paying $75, where before they were paying about $8. So it's an extra cost to them, yet they were for the bill. And for somebody to come out for a bill is generally means that they really, really like the bill, because a lot of times they'll just say they're neutral when it comes to lobby and the lobbyists and things like that. They were for the bill because they realized that if they can get somebody in and out faster, $75 is nothing. And now we have prospective CDL drivers waiting up to 30 to 45 days just to get in. And you can imagine what kind of cost that is compared to $75 if they can speed that process up. So, I'm excited about it. We're at least doing something, and we're no longer at the point where, unfortunately, the road use tax fund is very important and very sacred. And so if we take money out of that in order to build more DOT stations and put more of those situations into play where the state's paying for it, then we lose money on the roads and things like that. So that's just where we are. So I'm excited about the bill. It passed the House. I believe it was, I think there was one no vote, if I recall. I think it's 96-1. It's in the Senate now, and I'm fairly confident that it's got a really good chance to run over there. So to get through the floor and get to the governor's office. And so that's really all I have to say about it. But I'm depending on Craig to keep whipping him up over in the Senate to get this thing through. Put some pressure on you, Craig.
Sounds good.
That's lobbying, isn't
It is. I'm lobbying right now.
Lobbying, yeah. How long is the CDL good for?
I believe 8 years.
8 years, so $75 over 8 years.
Right. And you never have to go back in again.
Right.
So it's one time, and so as long as you keep your CDL current, you'll never have to do that again, unless you're upgrading your CDL, say from a straight truck to a semi or something.
All right. So this was House File 828. I had no idea that you authored it, so there might be one no vote in the Senate side just for the heck of it.
All right.
It's in the Senate Ways and Means Committee. It just got assigned to them on April 6th, so they're just got their first look at it, and I'm confident as well that this one will we'll fly through. I haven't heard any negatives from anybody about this. I did look; it was a 95-1 vote on the House side, and what I looked for is to make sure that Brian wasn't the no vote on it.
Sometimes you get confused and vote for the wrong bill.
Very good. No, I think it'll be a good bill.
Thanks, Craig.
Thank you. Tax increment financing, or TIF, is the next subject matter. What's your stance on the TIF legislation and the impacts it could have on rural Iowa?
So it's me first.
Senator,
House File 849. It's on the House side, and it did get through a committee, but it's stuck there. I don't see it going anywhere. There hasn't been any discussion on this thing on the Senate side that I've seen anyway. I think it'll be a pretty bad deal for most of this area, most of the district. I probably heard from every administrator in every city and county in my district that they don't want this thing to go through. So obviously it means a lot around here now. Again, I think this was an idea to correct some issue from a long time ago. And when I ask questions about what's the problem we're trying to solve, they give me something from so far back that it doesn't matter. So I just don't see it going anywhere. It might, but I haven't seen it.
Right.
I don't see it going anywhere either. I've made my thoughts on this very clear that I wouldn't vote for that. I wouldn't vote for anything that eliminates TIF or hurts TIF in the rural areas. I think there is a little bit of the thing that complicates it is when you see it used in cities that are growing like a weed already. Do they really need it? Okay, that's a good question. The controversy was from a number of years when Coralville, the mall in Coralville, basically was funded through TIF, and there were some feelings that they kind of misused it. But we can't throw out the baby with the bathwater. This is a good TIF. Works very well for rural Iowa. It's worked very well for Carroll County, I know, and for other entities. And so I haven't heard anybody who says that they would favor it, except for your budget hawks, folks like that. But I think for what we do in this area, we need it. So and I don't look for it to go anywhere either.
Thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Two questions on the next subject matter, and that's federal COVID dollars. First one is, each state is expected to receive federal dollars to help recover from COVID. Do you have any insight to what these dollars will be used for? Brian?
Okay. I know that there's some feeling about possibly not being able to get the money, or possibly even for the state to refuse the money. And the reason, I think, is because it's tied up very, very tightly on what you can use it for. So we want to make sure that we use it for something that is that will fit within the federal guidelines. I don't see any harm in taking the money, and then working through it and make sure that we can use it. And as far as what it would have to be used for, that's the big question. What would I like to see it used for? There's a lot of things we could use it for. I mean, when you think about some of those things with the broadband and things like that, and if there's a way that we can legally use it, when I say legally use it, I mean, to fit within the federal guidelines, use it towards broadband and those things, sure, why not? I mean, the ways we could use it, I think, are in that area. There's still, I'd be willing to go back one more time and make sure that we did help every type of business there is out there, because I think there's a few that still fell through the cracks when it came to COVID relief and the things that the state did. So if there's a few things we could do with that, I'd be fine with that also. But as far as knowing exactly how the dollars can be used, I think that really depends on what the federal government allows us to use it for, which at this point is very unclear.
Yeah. So I don't know what the numbers are, but I mean, I've heard numbers like over $1 billion, 1.4 billion was a number that was thrown around that the state might get. What I also don't know is, what strings are attached to that. Here's $1, but in order to get that dollar, you have to do X, Y, and Z. Maybe you have to remove voter ID. Maybe you have to. I mean, I have no idea what kind of things that they might attach to the money, and so hopefully we're not selling your soul to get a dollar. I don't like programs like this. It's like, here's a pot of cash, go figure out how you can spend it. We really need to find a problem and then go figure out how to finance it, not the other way around. So I'm not a big fan of the thing. That said, if somebody's going to just give you $1 billion, you ought to take it. Then figure it out, I guess. But I don't know. I'm bothered by programs like this because somebody's going to pay that money at some point in time. Our kids, our grandkids, somebody is going to foot the bill. And it really bothers me that we just take a pot of cash and start divvying it out.
All right, fair enough. And Ryan, you really covered the second part of that question, so we'll move on then to the next subject matter, and that's the bottle bill. Do you expect to see any movement on the bottle bill this session?
Yeah, so there were 3 bills in the Senate side, and I think there were 6 or 8 bills on the House side that dealt with this issue, and I think several of them have passed through the House. And I thought we had pretty good ground to see it passing on the Senate side. And then last week I saw a news article that said it was on life support in the Senate. So I've reached out to some of the senators involved, and we haven't been able to touch base yet on what is the problem and why is this thing on life support. I just don't know what's happening with it. That said, in all of these bills that are on there, if it doesn't improve the amount of money going to redemption centers, I'm going to be a no vote on it anyway. The basic problem that we have with this entire bottle bill is not having enough redemption centers or enough places for people to bring those cans to get their nickels back. And we keep choking them out of business with this 1 penny that's in there. And I've run the numbers. My clerk and we actually called, I think, 17 of the redemption centers across the state and asked them for statistics and data on how many employees do you have, what do you pay them, how many cans do you bring in, how many bottles do you bring in a year, et cetera. And we put all that together, and essentially every one of them is breaking even at best or losing money. And how do you continue a business in that kind of a model? And you don't. So we'll just continuously see more redemption centers leave and more issues where, Fairway doesn't want to take the cans back. The gas stations don't want to take the cans back. In fact, they refuse. They're breaking the law by refusing to do that. So what do we do with that issue? In short, I'm not going to be in favor of any bill that doesn't give the redemption centers some more ability to run their business and provide this service.
Right.
Yeah, so in the House, there's been a lot of talk in the last week or so on this bill, and I agree with what we're doing now. I think whatever we can do to get it through is fine, but there's a bill that's being talked about right now, which would basically shift that extra penny. Would be a half a penny would be absorbed by the point of sale, which is your Hy-Vees, your Fairways, your grocery stores, all of your all of the point, and that includes convenience stores. Everybody that sells at retail would absorb half a penny, and then the distributor would absorb the other half of the penny, which would be your person who, or your Anheuser-Busch distributor, your Pepsi, your Coke distributors. They would absorb the other half of that penny. So that is probably the one that I think has the best chance of getting through, and we're going to be debating that next week. And we're going to caucus on it next week, and then we have to make sure we have enough votes to get that one through. That's the one that I would prefer, because that's about the only thing that I've seen that in the end that would be acceptable to our leadership and to the folks that really have to accept it on the Republican side. And if that one goes through, that would allow the redemption centers to get that extra penny, and they need it. And I think we're at critical mass here with this. If we don't get something passed this year, I don't know how many more of these are going to go down. And the whole system right now, I think, is really a giant mess. It's just imploding, I believe, around us, because places that are selling these items refuse to take the cans back. You really can't prosecute them for doing that. There's a lot of things we have in the state of Iowa we have to do when it comes to law enforcement, and this is one that nobody wants to really take. So I'm all for it.
All right. Thank you both. Gentlemen, we have about 10 minutes left, and we've got a few more questions than we probably have time for. So the next one is recreational marijuana, and there's probably somebody in our audience that is really waiting for this to get passed. It wouldn't be me, but somebody might be. Would you support it?
When you mean the audience, do you mean these two out here? No, I would not support recreational marijuana. And I doubt that I ever would. I'm always open-minded, and if somebody can explain to me how it does not create a heck of a mess for employers, for law enforcement. How do you know if somebody is high because they got stoned, and they are stoned as they're driving down the road, or if it's from 15 days ago when they last did it? And so until we can really understand it better, and you hear all these stories, and all of it seems to be pretty anecdotal, but you'll hear about the Colorado experiment and how well it's gone out there and how great it is, and how much more tax money is coming in, which if that was the case and there was no harm from it, yeah, maybe it's a thing to do. But then you hear about a lot of social issues, that all the money that they've brought in tax-wise from this is being turned around and having to pay for the social issues that it's caused. That being said, I want to be real clear here. I'm not for recreational, but I am 100% for medicinal. There's things that it's really proven to help certain conditions that you wouldn't think. But I mean, there's more and more evidence showing that it helps with, the seizure thing is obvious. It does help with seizures. I've had people that have had things like MS and those types of issues that have had relief from the use of medicinal. So 100% for medicinal, and we need to keep looking at what it can do. The government refused it for a long time to even do studies because it was considered a class 1, and so private industry has really had to go out and do the studies to see what things it's effective for. But they're finding out more and more that medicinal has some great purposes. So, Greg.
Yeah, I mean, simple answer. I guess I'm with Brian on this. My simple answer would be no. If you've been to Denver lately, I think that you would probably have to agree that it's not a successful experiment. If that's the way you want to live, go to Denver. I think we've got enough problems as it is. The libertarian in me says let people do what they want to do, and the realist in me says taxpayers are going to foot the bill on it, and now we've got enough problems.
Yeah. All right. Good enough. Last subject matter then, the Second Amendment, gun law. Question is, the governor recently signed a constitutional carry gun law. What are your feelings about this new gun law? And Brian, I'll start with you, sir.
Okay. Again, just at 30,000 feet, I just want to say that what this bill really did was make it so that you could carry a gun without a carry permit. But it also made it so that if you want to acquire a gun, the things that you have to do are, if anything, more stringent than what they were before, as far as having to have a permit or do a background check every time you purchase a gun. So if you don't want to have a permit, which you're not required to, you still got to do the background check every time. And so I think it's, I don't think it's nearly as nefarious as a lot of people do. That's about all I have to say about it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd agree. It's not what you've read in the media. So I'm a gun owner. I've got a few guns, and I'm a concealed permit carrier. This particular bill, the passage of this, would actually make me less likely to sell to somebody that I know than what it would have been before. Had I done it before, simple misdemeanor. Now if I sell my gun to somebody who turns out to be somebody that I should not have sold to and I should have known, it's a Class D felony. Now, if you get convicted of a Class D felony, you lose all your weapons as well. You'd be a felon in possession. I would lose all of my gun rights. I'm not in the mood to do that. So the smart people are going to take their guns to a federal firearms dealer and say, hey, I want to sell this gun. Joe wants to buy it. Can you handle the paperwork, do the background checks, et cetera? That's what this bill will do. It actually makes it harder to do that transfer. Now, that said, if my wife or my son or my daughter wanted a weapon and I have known them their entire lives, most of it for my wife, then I could transfer my gun to them and they don't need to have a permit. If I ask my wife to, hey, put this in your purse for me and bring it to me because I got to be in this building, and then when I go to that one I want my gun back. She couldn't do that before. Now she can. She's got the right now to carry without a permit. So this thing just doesn't do what a lot of people think that it does. It's not going to be the Wild West, and we were told that several times before, and it hasn't happened that way. So I'm good with the bill. I think it's we just don't, as other people have said, we don't need a permission slip from the government to exercise our constitutional rights.
All right, and I think you pretty well covered the second part of that question with your response, and I appreciate that. So with that, I think the bewitching hour is getting pretty darn close to us. So again, I would like to thank the gentlemen this morning for their time. Senator, Representative, do appreciate it, and I sure learned something this morning, which I can take with me, I hope. I also want to again thank City Hall for allowing us to use their facility to host this forum this morning. It's always nice to connect with the legislatures, with the community through these virtual programs this year. And thanks to the member of the Carroll Chamber of Commerce Legislative Committee, of which I'm a part, for organizing the forum, and thanks to all of you, whether you watched this today or will do it sometime later when you can zoom through all of the commercials. We thank you for your attendance. Good day.
Thanks, John.